I need to make this perfectly clear before I begin. This is not an official report. This is my personal testimony, my warning, my plea to anyone who might stumble upon these words in the future. I am Commander Zektenuara of the Galactic Concordance Fleet, Strategic Liaison Division. I have participated in well over 30 interstellar campaigns, survived the prolonged Vathian incursion and the Argon Rift conflict, and once led a squadron that fought to defend 8,000 evacuees on a doomed research station. In all my cycles of service, I believed I had witnessed every imaginable horror war could offer. Then we crossed paths with humankind, and I realized I had been naive. We reached out to them in desperate hope, never once imagining what we were truly unleashing. Let the record show that I tried to warn my superiors from start. Let these words serve as a survival guide for future generations of any species who consider an alliance or a confrontation with humanity. Because for the sake of everything we hold sacred, you do not want human battleships in your war. I should begin by describing just how close we were to total annihilation. The Blight Collective had proven itself a threat unlike any we had ever known. It was not merely their savage cunning, nor their advanced gravitic weaponry that disrupted molecules and shredded entire dreadnoughts as if they were made of brittle glass. It was their absolute devotion to devouring all that was not them, like some twisted plague that moved through the stars with a single purpose. Over the course of 3 standard years, the Blight Collective ravaged 14 star systems, conquered a dozen major colony worlds, and pushed our proud Concordance Navy to the brink of collapse. Morale plummeted. Volunteers vanished. Civilian leaders whispered about potential surrender, even if it meant subjugation to the Blight's horrifying assimilation. In that darkest hour, we scrambled for solutions, dispatching any scout ship we could spare to the most remote corners of the galaxy, praying we might find allies. We hoped for a miracle. We found humanity. Humanity. At first glance, they seemed laughably primitive. Their home system was far off the major hyperlane routes, and their vessels were reliant on sublight drives and slow, inefficient FTL technology derived from nuclear fusion. They had hardly even colonized beyond their own star's outer planets, and their fleet was minimal compared to ours. The reason we did not simply move along was one curious detail in the expedition's preliminary report. Humans had been fighting wars on their planet since before they had written language. To us, that was not so unusual. Many species experience barbaric conflicts before uniting under a single planetary government. But humans, from all that we gathered, had never truly abandoned the cycle of conflict. Indeed, their history was nothing but constant war in new forms, from tribal struggles with spears, to mass-scale industrial conflicts, to advanced global and orbital warfare. Instead of one final unifying event that ended their destructive tendencies, they merely refined those tendencies into an art. And that is precisely why our High Council believed they could help. We were desperate, after all. I still remember the day the High Council announced the initiative. Reports had come in of yet another system, Carradin's Reach, overrun by Blight forces. Half our dreadnoughts stationed there were utterly destroyed by a new variation of Blight gravimetric disruptor tech. The Council convened a hurried emergency session to discuss the path forward. Most of our potential allies, fledgling polities or smaller independent worlds, had already declined to intervene. Fear made them unwilling to gamble their existence on saving ours. That left one significant possibility: Earth, the small, seemingly insignificant planet with a species that thrived on war. They adapt swiftly, noted Counselor in Amrath. Their methods, while crude, may be precisely what we need to confound the Blight's predictable counters to our strategic protocols. Another counselor, skeptical, pointed out, yes, but they barely have a presence in this galaxy. They cannot even keep pace with our cruisers at FTL. Yet desperation overruled caution. They voted. The measure passed unanimously. Thus did we extend an offer of contact and cooperation to a people we scarcely understood. When I speak of that first diplomatic mission to Earth, I can only rely on the archived transmissions and the testimonies of those who survived the fiasco. The Concordance dispatched our grand diplomatic ship, the Magnanimous Accord, with our most revered ambassador, Rena Vorselia, famous for her empathic abilities and her talent for forming peaceful accords with species of every temperament. They arrived in Earth's orbit under stealth protocols, planning to set down discreetly in a remote location so as not to cause panic. But Earth's radar net, though primitive by our standards, was apparently quite adept at detecting unknown craft. Within minutes of entering the atmosphere, the Magnanimous Accord was being tracked by multiple Earth defense installations. Soon after, it found itself surrounded by jets, their designs archaic but clearly well-armed. From the eyewitness accounts, the humans demanded to know if the Magnanimous Accord's crew intended an invasion. Ambassador Vorselia, still hopeful, emerged unarmed and proclaimed, "We come in peace to offer alliance." Many humans on site were, by all reports, entirely unfazed by her alien nature. Some asked if she came from a star as a visitor. Some asked if she was prepared to prove her identity with some sort of Earth-based identification. It was bizarre. Eventually, human military and political authorities convened in a large conference hall to hear Vorselia's proposal. The ambassador delivered her carefully rehearsed speech about the threat of the Blight Collective, describing in detail the atrocities we had endured and the technology the Blight employed. The humans were intrigued, though some apparently didn't believe a word of it. Only after Vorselia presented high-resolution battle footage, ships disintegrating mid-flight, entire orbital stations shredded by invisible gravitational waves, did the room fall silent. The humans realized we were not exaggerating. One of them, a stern-looking woman who introduced herself as Director Avelini Cross, asked, "So you want us to fight these creatures with you? But what exactly do we get in return?" Our ambassadors had prepared an extensive benefits package, including shared technology, potential membership in the Concordance, and guaranteed protection. Yet the humans countered with additional demands that our negotiators found shockingly audacious. They insisted on complete operational autonomy for their military forces, meaning no Concordance general or admiral could override a human commander's battlefield decision. They demanded full, unredacted access to any technology related to propulsion, shielding, and weaponry that might be relevant to the war effort. They further requested territorial rights to any system they helped liberate if no other recognized concordant species laid prior claim. And in a particularly staggering clause, they insisted that the Concordance would never order human ships to retreat from an engagement. "We either fight to win," Cross said calmly, "or we die trying. We don't like to run." Ambassador Vorselia reportedly took a full minute to respond, her luminescent throat sac pulsing with stress and confusion. But Earth's leaders would not budge. They wanted it all, or no deal. Time was short, and in our desperation, we signed. That is when the High Council assigned me, Commander Zek Tenuara, as the liaison to the newly formed human contingent. It was in principle a prestigious position. In practice, it was more like dropping me in a nest of chaotic, unpredictable creatures whose entire worldview seemed tailor-made to defy our carefully honed strategies. My first encounter with a human battleship was on the orbital docks of Concordance Station 6, where the warships of numerous species underwent final refits before deployment. I had grown used to the streamlined, elegant designs of our own ships, glimmering hulls shaped by centuries of aerodynamic efficiency and vacuum, with every weapon emplacement smoothly integrated into the shielding arrays. Then I saw the HSS Indomitable. I almost laughed out loud. Its hull plating protruded in odd angles. Its missile batteries bristled like quills around the midsection, and there were entire sections that appeared to be bolted together as if by some frantic mechanic in a hurry. According to the specs, it could support a rotating arsenal of ballistic weapons, as well as a suite of energy disruptors adapted for the Concordance data packets we had offered. There were heavy, reinforced compartments that served as redundant backups for life support, weapons control, even thruster management. Every system was covered by multiple layers of duplication. The design philosophy was profoundly alien to me, used to sleek starship construction where each system was elegantly integrated rather than brutishly layered. Then I met Admiral Abigail Kane. She was not tall for a human, barely surpassing my shoulder, but she moved like a predator. Her body language radiated confidence and an unsettling level of calm. She gave me a tour of the Indomitable, pointing out the close-quarter corridors, the cramped bunk rooms, the labyrinth of engineering pipes that ran along the ceilings and floors. I recall blurting out, "Why in the cosmos are these still exposed? Shouldn't they be behind armored panels?" Kane looked at me with a small, humorless smile. "If we need to fix a breach or reroute a coolant line mid-battle, we do it by hand. We can't rely on fully automated systems because the enemy might jam or disable them." Redundancy, Commander Tenuara. That's how we survive. There was no arrogance in her tone, only an unshakable certainty. It made my bioluminescent frills tighten with uneasy respect. My induction into human military doctrine was equally disconcerting. Their strategic officer, a Commander Juro Santoro, showed me simulations of how they planned to engage the Blight. The Blight specialized in using gravimetric disruptors that tore most ships apart if they stayed in a weapon's effective radius for too long. The standard concordance approach was to maintain a wide perimeter, use long-range energy bombardment, and attempt to overload the disruptor from afar. The humans, on the other hand, intended to charge straight into the disruptor's radius, rotate their heaviest armor plating to absorb as much punishment as possible, and strike at the weapon's emitter with massive tungsten projectiles traveling at near-relativistic speeds. I remember stammering out some protest, something like, "You'd be risking catastrophic hull failure in seconds." Santoro shrugged. "Maybe, but if we manage to knock out the disruptor in one well-timed volley, we'll sustain damage, not total destruction. We're willing to take that gamble." Take that gamble. The words echoed in my mind for days. What species so casually gambles with hundreds, if not thousands, of lives, purely on the assumption that their blow might strike first? Our maiden engagement alongside the human fleet occurred at a small, but strategically relevant Blight outpost on Outeram V. The Concordance contributed 6 light cruisers, while the humans fielded 2 battleships, the Indomitable and her sister ship, the Reckless. I stood on the bridge of our lead cruiser, GCS Radiant Fury, watching through the large view screen as the 2 human vessels positioned themselves at the front. Our standard procedure would have been to soften up the outpost from a safe distance, employing corvettes with specialized stealth drives to sabotage the Blight disruptors. Admiral Kane had other ideas. "We're running Operation Hammerfall," she declared, as though that phrase clarified everything. I nearly choked on my own breath when I saw them activate full thrusters, blazing directly toward the heart of the Blight's defense perimeter. Our cruisers were left scrambling to keep up or at least provide covering fire for these madmen. The Blight responded with typical ferocity, unleashing beams of invisible gravity waves that caused sections of the Indomitable's outer hull to buckle. The structural integrity alarm on the Radiant Fury rang in warning, though it wasn't even our ship taking the hit. We expected the Indomitable to break off, or at least slow down. Instead, the battleship pressed forward, venting atmosphere from one side where the hull had cracked open. Then, at a range that I considered far too close, they fired their tungsten rods. There is something strangely barbaric about the sight of these physical projectiles hurtling across the void. We, the Concordance, had grown so reliant on energy-based weaponry that the idea of a massive metal rod smashing a target conjured a primal, brutal image. And yet it worked. The Blight disruptor array erupted in a burst of greenish-blue fire, evidently suffering catastrophic meltdown. The Indomitable swung around, rotating its intact plating toward the rest of the outpost's defenses. The Reckless, moving in tandem, launched a wave of smaller kinetic missiles that hammered the station's shield generators. Within 20 minutes, the outpost was reduced to floating wreckage. Casualties on the human side were not light. A number of crew compartments had been breached, and I later learned that dozens perished from depressurization. But from a strategic standpoint, it was a total success. Months of planning and cautious concordance procedures had been outdone by a single, reckless charge. Word spread throughout concordance space faster than even our best FTL couriers could carry it. Humanity's unstoppable battleships, their savage tactics, and their willingness to accept steep losses in exchange for quick, decisive victories captured the attention of every officer, every soldier, and every civilian tired of the slow, attritional grind we had experienced against the Blight. Suddenly, everyone wanted to fight alongside the humans, hoping that these bizarre, fearless methods might finally grant us the upper hand. My personal misgivings, however, only deepened. I took to writing detailed memos to my superiors, cautioning that while humans were undeniably effective, their tactics could spark unforeseen consequences. They're not bound by the same risk calculus as we are, I wrote. They will risk losing a limb if it means severing the enemy's throat. This might turn the tide of war, but what will it cost us once the Blight is gone? I received curt acknowledgments in return. The concordance had grown intoxicated with the promise of victory, and my concerns were overshadowed by an almost manic hope. The Blight, for their part, took notice. No longer content to focus on our standard fleets, they began assigning more substantial forces to any system rumored to have a human presence. It was as though they feared these unpredictable newcomers, and with good reason. During one encounter at the Izaran Belt, a trio of human battleships obliterated 6 Blight cruisers in an ambush that took less than 15 minutes, sustaining heavy but survivable damage. The entire star lane was littered with the scraps of Blight hulls. When the Concordance support vessels arrived to assist, they found the humans already repairing their battleships on-site, using salvage from the destroyed Blight ships wherever it might fit. It was disturbingly resourceful, like seeing a vicious predator devour part of its prey to heal a wound. Everything about it was a testament to the humans' single-minded focus on victory at any cost. Some of us whispered that if the humans were not unstoppable, they were at least so doggedly relentless that the Blight had finally met a force even more ruthless than themselves. Our fortunes turned decisively at the Battle of Arctis, a system believed to be one of the Blight Collective's major strongholds. Intelligence indicated formidable defenses, including multiple gravimetric disruptors, a planetary array that could generate distortions on a scale large enough to affect entire flotillas, and a newly developed gravitational siphon they were testing in the system's asteroid belt. The Concordance assembled the largest fleet we had ever mustered, 20 dreadnoughts, nearly 100 cruisers, countless support frigates, and the entire human contingent, 7 battleships in total, led by Admiral Kane on the HSS Indomitable. I was stationed aboard the GCS Righteous Path, commanded by Grand Admiral Lucan Rao, who had orchestrated more than a dozen conventional campaigns against the Blight. The plan was methodical. We would establish a perimeter, draw out the Blight's main defenses, and rely on the humans for a critical strike at the center once we pinned the enemy forces down. But mere moments after we dropped out of FTL, it became evident the Blight had prepared a devastating trap. Sensors showed the Blight had far more ships than predicted. Their planetary array was fully operational and combined with at least 3 newly built orbital platforms that glowed with unnatural green light. As soon as they detected us, they unleashed waves of gravimetric interference so intense that even our largest dreadnoughts trembled. Alarms erupted across the Righteous Paths Bridge, and half of our support frigates lost formation. Grand Admiral Rao glanced at the tactical readouts and made the call to retreat. We need to regroup, reevaluate. This is not the engagement we prepared for. Admiral Kane's response came over the comm with a tone that was both respectful and quietly defiant. Admiral Rao, if we retreat, the Blight will see it coming. They've spent so long fighting our standard tactics that they will push that advantage. We have a narrow window to exploit their fixed, forward-facing defenses. Their rear approach is wide open. Rao retorted that the gravitational well of Arctis's binary star system made that route effectively impassable for standard vessels. Kane's voice hardened. Impassable for standard vessels, perhaps, What followed was the single most astounding feat of starship maneuvering I have ever witnessed. The human battleships accelerated toward the outer edge of the binary star's gravitational well, ignoring the safest navigational paths that Concordance protocols had designated. Our sensors lit up with improbable velocity readings. I felt the righteous path's deck vibrate as we tried to keep a supportive angle, but the human ships sped off on a trajectory that defied all sense. By the time the Blight recognized what was happening, the humans had already begun a slingshot orbit around Arctus's secondary star, a slingshot so tight that any minor miscalculation would mean disintegration. Gravity spiked. The Indomitable's hull glowed with friction from debris and cosmic dust. On the sensors, we watched them vanish behind the star's corona, only to emerge behind the Blight's main blockade. The defenders scrambled to rotate, but their entire formation was anchored forward, anticipating an assault from our standard approach vector. The humans unleashed devastation. Admiral Kane led a precise strike at the orbital platforms, hurling heavy kinetic warheads that somehow bypassed or overloaded the gravitational distorters. The giant tungsten lances slammed into each station's core. Explosions rippled out in pulses of white and green. The Indomitable and her sister ships launched salvos of missiles that carried specialized grav jammers, technology the humans had apparently developed based on Concordance research. Within minutes, key Blight disruptor nodes were offline, and the planetary array's power levels dipped precariously. Meanwhile, the Righteous Path and the rest of the Concordance fleet witnessed the chaos and realized it was our moment to strike. We surged forward, capitalizing on the Blight's sudden disarray. Dreadnought beam cannons lanced across the void. Our cruisers targeted the remaining disruptors. The combined assault shattered the once impenetrable stronghold. 40 minutes. That was all it took from the moment the humans finished their slingshot maneuver to the final annihilation of the Blight's orbital defenses. We had believed we were on the brink of a disastrous retreat, yet there we were, victorious. Of course, the human contingent took losses. The HSS Reckless was torn nearly in half by a last-ditch Blight gravitational surge, with no survivors reported. Several of the other battleships limped away, venting atmosphere and running on auxiliary power. Yet they had effectively decapitated the Blight's command in the Arctis sector, and any further organized resistance collapsed within days. It was the single most triumphant victory the Concordance had experienced in the war. Our entire populace erupted in celebration, praising the humans as heroes and saviors who dared to do the impossible. With Arctis fallen, the Blight Collective's campaign against us quickly unraveled. Their fleets retreated to more distant strongholds, and we systematically pushed them back. Within a few months, major hostilities ended. We designated it as the official conclusion of what historians would call the Blight War. The galaxy, battered but hopeful, took a collective breath of relief. From the vantage of the average Concordance citizen, humanity had rescued us from certain doom, forging a path to peace. Yet behind closed doors, the High Council convened once more, this time to discuss the human question. How do we proceed with a species whose raw capacity for warfare, whose willingness to ignore conventional logic, had just proven decisive in saving us all, but now loomed large as a potential new threat? I was there, seated among the highest echelons of Concordance command, watching the tension ripple through the air. Counselor Amrath, who once championed reaching out to humans, looked unsettled as she recited the final casualty lists. Tens of thousands of our own lost, and hundreds more from the human side. Another counselor fretted over how easily the humans had adapted our technology to their ballistic weaponry, a cross-pollination that might lead them to surpass even our most advanced designs. A hush fell over the room as Grand Admiral Rouse spoke. "We owe them a debt," he said, "but we must also ensure that debt does not grow into dependence, or worse, subservience. They are unpredictable." That was the point, of course. Their unpredictability had won us the war. The final decision was effectively the only possible one. We officially integrated humanity into the Concordance, granting them the full membership their leaders had bargained for, complete with their own autonomous fleet. We would maintain diplomatic ties, share technology according to the treaty stipulations, and attempt to foster mutual trust in the post-war era. Some voiced hopes that humanity might shift its focus from martial ventures to peaceful expansion and scientific pursuits. Others, like me, suspected that humans would remain exactly who they were, a species that could turn savage necessity into a driving force, forever ready to break the rules if it meant achieving victory. In the aftermath, I spent weeks compiling an exhaustive assessment of human combat doctrines and ship designs, distributing it to select senior staff. My report concluded with a stark caution: human unpredictability, their comfort with risky maneuvers, and their willingness to accept high casualties defy every conventional standard upon which the Concordance has built its military. While they have proved honorable allies, one must not forget that their strategic logic can as easily turn inward as outward. Proceed with caution. In private, I wrote an even blunter evaluation and sent it to only a handful of trusted confidants. If we ever cross them, I wrote, or stand in the way of what they deem necessary, we may find ourselves on the receiving end of that unstoppable fury. Now that the blight threat has faded, the galaxy stands at a precarious crossroads. New alliances are forming, trade routes are reopening, and entire systems once terrorized by the blight are rebuilding. Meanwhile, humanity is out there, forging ahead with their refitted battleships, claiming salvage rights in the freed territories, and quietly establishing deeper infrastructure that merges Concordance technologies with their own mechanical ingenuity. I cannot say for certain if they harbor ambitions beyond what was agreed upon, but I have seen enough to know that any species that thrives so completely on adversity will not remain idle. I have watched them laugh in the face of dangers that would make other species cower. I have seen them patch their hulls with scavenged alien metal in the middle of a live battlefield. I have heard them calmly compare casualty rates to decide if an operation was worth the cost. They do not see war as a last resort, but rather as a puzzle to be solved, an arena for invention, a proving ground for their next evolution in arms. One might call me paranoid or ungrateful. I assure you, I am neither. I am deeply relieved that we survived the Blight War, and I am genuinely thankful for the role humans played in securing that victory. Yet gratitude does not erase the underlying truth. Humans are a species set apart by their unique acceptance of conflict. And so, I write this final testimony, set to be archived in the Concordance record, with a single overriding message for any who read it in centuries to come. If you're facing a dire threat and cannot see any hope of prevailing, then yes, you may consider reaching out to humanity. They might very well save you, but understand the bargain you make. When you invite human battleships into your war, you invite a force whose capacity for innovation and bold action goes hand in hand with an almost casual approach to danger and sacrifice. They will help you win, but they will transform the very nature of that war, leaving you to wonder if you have traded one terror for another. Perhaps in time, as they integrate more fully with the Concordance, humanity will temper its extremes. Perhaps they will learn to abide by our rules of engagement or adopt our more measured approaches to conflict resolution. I, however, do not believe that will happen. Their entire history on a single planet they nearly destroyed and rebuilt repeatedly tells the tale of a species that thrives on adversity and emerges stronger from each brutal lesson. They neither forget nor regret the blood they shed. They only learn new ways to shed it more efficiently. It is simultaneously horrifying and awe-inspiring to behold. And they do it all with that peculiar gleam in their eyes, a confidence that no matter how outrageous or impossible their strategy might seem, they will find a way to make it work. They are dreamers, tinkerers, mad scientists, and fearless soldiers, all rolled into one. So my final word to anyone who reads this, be they Concordance official, distant observer, or some newly discovered species wondering if they should petition for Earth's involvement in a conflict, do not, for the sake of everything holy, invite the humans to your war. Unless your extinction is guaranteed anyway, unless you are cornered with nowhere left to run and no hope left to cling to. Only in that final scenario might the arrival of those clunky, patchwork human battleships be your salvation. But be warned, you will never again see warfare, or even your own place in the galaxy, in the same light. Once you have glimpsed what they are capable of, no measure of comfortable routine or cautious doctrine will reassure you. You will realize that where other species see an impassable barrier, humans see a challenge they cannot wait to overcome. I wish I could offer some reassurance that these unstoppable warriors would remain loyal friends in perpetuity. Maybe they will. My personal interactions with their officers and engineers suggest a deep streak of honor and camaraderie. They did not betray us or demand more resources than were promised, and they fought with valor to end the Blight threat. That, in itself, deserves our respect. Nevertheless, it is precisely because they are so honorable that I fear the day we might stand on opposite sides of some cosmic dispute. If they decide their cause is just, they will treat us with the same unwavering determination they brought to bear against the Blight, and I shudder to think how that confrontation would end. I have seen Admiral Kane, battered and bleeding, standing on the smoking bridge of the Indomitable after the battle at Arctis, delivering a calm status report while fires rage behind her. I have seen crew members from both the Indomitable and the Reckless gather scrap pieces of hull from destroyed Blight cruisers, welding them to patch holes in the human battleships. I have heard them joke about how it was an improvement over the original armor. And in that moment, I realized that these people do not merely endure adversity. They embrace it, reshape it, and hurl it right back at the enemy. Through that lens, every conflict is simply an opportunity to learn and innovate. Facing an opponent like that is a nightmare no sane commander would choose. And yet, we did choose it, or rather we chose to align ourselves with them. It was that or face certain extinction. In fairness, the humans never once deceived us about their methods. They never pretended to adhere to a risk-averse or strictly logical approach to combat. From the start, they made it abundantly clear that they would fight the way they believed necessary or not at all. We gave them free rein, and they delivered us from the brink. In time, perhaps we will look back and call it the best decision we ever made. But one can be thankful for a rescue while also respecting and dreading the power of the rescuer. I suspect many of our admirals feel the same, even if they deny it in public. So if you, dear reader, ever see those blocky, asymmetric ships dropping out of FTL into your star system, do not be fooled by their unrefined appearance. Inside those hulls, there are men and women who have turned war into an art of cunning, improvisation, and fierce resolve. They will either become your greatest allies or the last adversary you will ever face, depending on which side of their guns you stand. And if you happen to find yourself in desperate need of a near-miraculous victory, well, I wish you luck in forging an alliance with them. I hope, for your sake, that you truly have no other choice. Because once the humans arrive, they will do whatever it takes to win, and you may find that your war becomes unrecognizable in their hands. They might save you, but they will also leave your eyes forever open to the raw, unstoppable potential of a species that seems to view the impossible as little more than a challenge to be embraced. I sign off this personal record in the solemn hope that we never again require the sheer audacity of humanity's battleships. But if we do, I pray they remain on our side. May the cosmos grant that we have not simply replaced one existential threat with another. If you take nothing else from these words, remember just this. For the sake of everything holy, keep the human battleships out of this war. Unless, of course, you have no other option left. Then, by all means, call them. Pray they answer. Embrace yourself for what follows. You have been warned.